The rain hammered against the windows of the Grandview Manor like bullets, each drop a warning I should have heeded. I pressed my ear against the oak door of the bridal suite, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Inside, my fiancée Sarah and her pack of influencer friends were having what they called their final girls meeting. What I heard next would haunt me forever. Okay, ladies, let's vote. Sarah's voice carried that fake sweetness she used for her Instagram videos. Should I actually go through with marrying Danny tomorrow or cut my losses now? My blood turned to ice. Tomorrow was supposed to be our wedding day. 3 years of planning, $50,000 spent, 200 guests arriving in the morning. Honestly, Sarah, he's so controlling, her best friend Madison chirped. Remember when he questioned your spending on those Louboutin boots? Right? And he's always making those sarcastic comments about my content creation career, added Jessica, another member of their toxic circle. Like, sorry your tech job is boring, Danny. Sarah laughed, that cruel laugh I'd been hearing more often lately. The worst part is how he thinks he's better than us because he grew up poor and made something of himself. Please. Daddy's connections got him that promotion, not his coding skills. That was a lie. A complete fabrication. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for 2 years to earn that senior developer position at Morrison Tech. But Sarah had convinced herself, and apparently everyone else, that her father had pulled strings. So what's the vote? Madison asked. I say dump him, Jessica said immediately. Same, echoed another voice I recognized as Brittany, Sarah's college roommate. Wait, Sarah said, and for a moment hope flickered in my chest. I can't just dump him. Do you know how much content I've gotten from this engagement? The wedding planning videos alone have gotten me 50,000 new followers. My hope died a brutal death. So what's your plan? Madison asked. I'm going to break him down tomorrow. Make him apologize publicly for being such a controlling jerk. Get it all on video. Then, after the honeymoon content, I'll slowly phase him out. Maybe catch him cheating or something. The room erupted in giggles. Oh my God, Sarah, you're evil, Brittany squealed. I love it. The public apology is genius, Madison agreed. Make him grovel in front of everyone. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking with rage. 3 years, 3 years of thinking I'd found the love of my life, and she was treating our relationship like a social media strategy. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Can't wait to marry you tomorrow, baby. You're going to make me the happiest woman alive. The hypocrisy made me physically ill. I walked down the Manor's creaking hallway, past portraits of dead rich people who probably would have fit right in with Sarah's crowd. My footsteps echoed in the empty space, matching the hollow feeling in my chest. But as I reached the main staircase, something shifted inside me. The hurt began crystallizing into something else. Something colder. Something calculating. Sarah wanted a show. She'd get one. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to my buddy Mike from the gym, then to a few other friends who'd been questioning Sarah's influence on me. By the time I finished, I had everything I needed for tomorrow. Sarah thought she knew me. Thought I was just some pushover tech nerd she could manipulate for content. She had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. I spent the rest of the night in my hotel room, not sleeping, just planning. Every detail had to be perfect. Every contingency covered. Sarah wanted controlling? I'd show her what controlling really looked like. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I got dressed in my tuxedo, adjusting my tie in the mirror. The man looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd proposed to Sarah on a beach in Malibu. That man was naive, trusting. This man had learned a valuable lesson about the nature of people like Sarah and her friends. My phone rang. Sarah. Good morning, future husband. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. Are you ready for the best day of our lives? Absolutely, I said, and I meant it. Just not in the way she thought. Danny, there's something we need to discuss before the ceremony. Here it comes. What's that, sweetheart? Well, some of the girls were talking and we think, that maybe you should apologize to everyone. You know, for being so difficult during the planning process. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. Apologize for what exactly? You know, for questioning my decisions, for making sarcastic comments, for just being so controlling. It would mean a lot to me if you acknowledged that in front of our families and friends. You want me to apologize at our wedding? Just a quick little speech before the vows. Nothing major. It would really show everyone how much you've grown. I let the silence stretch until she started to fidget. I could hear it in her voice when she spoke again. Danny, you'll do this for me, right? For us? Of course, I said finally. I'll definitely give a speech everyone will remember. The Grandview Manors Chapel was packed with 200 guests, all dressed in their finest, all expecting a fairy tale wedding. Sarah had spared no expense on decorations, white roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers, silk drapes, everything perfect for her Instagram photos. I stood at the altar watching her walk down the aisle in her $5,000 dress, her father beaming beside her. She looked radiant, and for a split second, I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. The officiant, a pompous man Sarah had chosen because he looked good on camera, cleared his throat and began the ceremony. I barely heard his words. I was focused on the small wireless microphone clipped to my lapel, the one connected to the manor's sound system, the one Sarah had insisted on, so our vows would be heard clearly. Before we begin the vows, the officiant announced, "The groom has requested to say a few words." Sarah beamed at me, thinking she'd won. Behind her, I could see Madison and Jessica in the front row, phones out and recording. Sarah's parents looked expectant. My parents looked confused, but supportive. I took the microphone from the officiant and looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady. Sarah asked me to make a speech, to apologize for my behavior during our engagement. Sarah's smile widened. She actually clasped her hands together like she was watching a romantic movie. She's right. I do owe everyone an apology, especially Sarah. I paused, reaching into my jacket pocket. Sarah thought I was going for tissues. Instead, I pulled out a small remote control. I apologized for not seeing sooner what kind of person I was marrying. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. I apologized for not realizing that our entire relationship was just content for her social media career. Now she looked confused, worried. And I apologized for not understanding that she and her friends saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM and punching bag. The chapel was dead silent. Sarah's face had gone white. But most of all, I apologized for what's about to happen next. I pressed the button on the remote. The chapel's sprinkler system, which I'd spent the morning rigging with help from Mike and his construction crew, activated. But instead of water, it rained down something else entirely. Rotten fruit, moldy vegetables, spoiled milk. Weeks' worth of garbage I'd been collecting and storing in refrigerated trucks parked behind the manor. The stench hit immediately. Guests screamed and ran for cover. Sarah stood frozen in shock as chunky milk and rotten tomatoes splattered across her perfect dress. Madison slipped on a banana peel and crashed into a flower arrangement. Jessica got hit square in the face with what used to be a head of lettuce, but I wasn't done. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced over the chaos, my voice booming through the sound system, "let me tell you what your beloved Sarah really thinks of all of you." I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made the night before. Sarah's voice crystal clear, talking about manipulating me for content, planning to frame me for cheating, calling our guests pathetic small-town losers who were lucky to be invited to witness her perfection. The few guests who hadn't fled stopped in their tracks. Sarah's parents looked mortified. My parents looked confused, but were starting to understand. Sarah finally found her voice. "Danny, stop this. You're humiliating me." "Humiliating you," I laughed, and it echoed through the chapel. "Sweetheart, you haven't seen humiliation yet." I pressed another button. The large screens Sarah had installed to display our love story slideshow flickered to life. But instead of romantic photos, they showed screenshots of her group chat with her friends. Every cruel comment about me. Every plan to manipulate me. Every laugh at my expense. "You wanted controlling, Sarah? This is controlling." She lunged at me, slipping immediately on the rotten fruit covering the floor. Her dress, which had cost more than most people's cars, was now stained beyond repair. "You psycho!" she screamed. "I'll ruin you for this." "With what platform?" I asked calmly. "Your Instagram account that's about to be flooded with videos of this? Your YouTube channel that's going to get canceled when people see how you really treat the people who love you?" Because, of course, the whole thing was being live streamed. I'd hacked into her own social media accounts and was broadcasting everything to her 100,000 followers in real time. Sarah's father, a pompous lawyer who'd never liked me, stepped forward. "You little bastard, I'll sue you for every penny you have." "For what? Exposing your daughter's true nature?" "Good luck with that, counselor." I looked around at the destruction, at the guests covered in filth, at Sarah sobbing in her ruined dress, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: satisfaction. "Oh, and Sarah? I'm moving to Seattle next week. New job, new life. Thanks for the motivation to finally leave this toxic waste dump you call a social circle." I walked down the aisle, stepping carefully around the mess, and paused at the chapel doors. "Enjoy cleaning this up. I hear rotten fruit stains are really hard to get out." The last thing I saw before leaving was Sarah on her knees in the muck, screaming at her friends to help her, while they all just stood there recording everything for their own social media accounts. Even in her moment of complete humiliation, they couldn't resist the content opportunity. Perfect. 8 months later, I was back. Seattle had been good to me. The job at Apex Technologies paid twice what Morrison Tech had offered, and the distance from Sarah's world had given me time to think, to plan, and to become someone new, someone harder, someone who understood that in a world full of sharks, you either learned to bite back or got eaten alive. But I wasn't done with Sarah, not even close. I'd kept tabs on her through mutual friends and social media. The wedding disaster had initially hurt her online presence, but she'd spun it masterfully. Suddenly, I was the abusive ex-fiancé who'd psychologically tortured her. She'd gained sympathy followers, landed a book deal to write about surviving toxic relationships, and was now dating Trevor, a personal trainer whose abs were apparently more impressive than his IQ. She thought she'd won, thought she'd turned my moment of revenge into her comeback story. She had no idea I was just getting started. I rented a sleek downtown apartment and started quietly reconnecting with old friends. Not Sarah's crowd. I was done with those parasites forever. But real people. People who'd known me before Sarah had started isolating me from anyone who might question her influence. Mike was the first person I called. "Danny? Holy shit, man, you're back." His voice boomed through the phone. "Dude, that wedding thing was legendary. It's still on YouTube. Someone made it into a TikTok compilation that got like 5 million views." "Is that right?" I tried to sound disinterested, but inside I was pleased. The more viral it stayed, the harder it would be for Sarah to completely rewrite history. "So, what brings you back to our little slice of paradise?" "Business opportunity," I lied smoothly. "Plus, I missed the old neighborhood." We met at Murphy's Pub, the same dive bar where we'd spent countless nights before Sarah had decided my friends weren't aspirational enough for her image. Mike looked exactly the same: broad shoulders, calloused hands, the kind of guy who solved problems with direct action rather than manipulation. "You look different," he said after we'd ordered beers. "Sharper, like you've been hitting the gym." I had been, along with taking boxing lessons, learning photography, and studying social media manipulation techniques. If I was going to destroy Sarah's world, I needed to understand it first. "Seattle changed me," I said. "Made me realize I'd been playing defense my whole life. Time to try offense." Mike grinned. "I like the sound of that. What do you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and showed him Sarah's latest Instagram post. It was a photo of her and Trevor at some charity gala, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. The caption read, "So grateful for this amazing man who shows me what real love looks like every day. Blessed beyond measure. Real love, never settle." "She's got 150,000 followers now," I said. "Book deal, sponsorship deals, the whole influencer package. All built on the narrative that she's a survivor who overcame an abusive relationship." "That's some grade A bullshit," Mike muttered. "It gets better. Trevor's been cheating on her with Madison for 3 months." Mike's eyebrows shot up. "Madison? Her best friend Madison?" "The very same. I hired a private investigator in Seattle. Turns out Trevor's got gambling debts up to his eyeballs, and Madison's been helping him hide it from Sarah. They've been skimming money from Sarah's business accounts to pay off his bookies. Jesus, how'd you find all this out? Money talks, Mike, and I've got a lot more of it than I used to. The truth was, I'd become obsessed. Every spare moment in Seattle had been spent learning about Sarah's new life, mapping out her relationships, understanding her vulnerabilities. I'd hired not just a private investigator, but a social media consultant, a forensic accountant, and even a therapist to help me understand the psychology of people like Sarah and her friends. I wasn't just planning revenge anymore. I was planning complete destruction. So what's the play? Mike asked. Phase 1 starts tomorrow. Sarah's hosting that big charity event for underprivileged kids, right? The one that's supposed to rehabilitate her image? Yeah, at the Riverside Community Center. Big deal, lots of local media. Perfect, I'm going to be there. As what? You think she'll just let you waltz in? I smiled and pulled out a business card. It identified me as David Chen, freelance photographer for Seattle Metropolitan Magazine. Fake name, fake credentials, but a very real press pass. Amazing what you can accomplish when you know the right people. Mike shook his head in admiration. You've really thought this through. Mike, I spent 8 months in Seattle learning how to be the kind of person who wins these games. Sarah taught me that being nice gets you nowhere. Being smart and ruthless, that gets you everything. We finished our beers and parted ways, but not before Mike gave me his word that he'd be ready when I needed backup. I drove home through the familiar streets, past the houses where I'd grown up, past the high school where Sarah and I had first met, past the coffee shop where I'd proposed to her. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, less important. Sarah's world, which had once seemed so glamorous and unattainable, now looked like what it really was, a shallow pond full of small fish pretending to be sharks. But I'd learned to swim in deeper waters now. And tomorrow, I was going to start pulling them under, one by one. I spent the evening reviewing my files on Sarah, Trevor, Madison, and the rest of their circle. Photos, financial records, text message screenshots, social media analytics, everything I'd need to systematically dismantle their lives. Sarah had made one crucial mistake when she'd humiliated me. She'd assumed I would just disappear, just fade away like a bad memory she could reshape into content. Instead, she'd created an enemy with nothing left to lose and all the resources in the world to destroy her. Tomorrow, she'd start learning the difference. The Riverside Community Center buzzed with activity as Sarah's charity event got underway. Local news cameras captured every moment while Sarah, radiant in a designer dress that probably cost more than most of the families she was supposedly helping made in a month, worked the crowd like the professional manipulator she'd become. I watched from across the room, my camera hanging around my neck, press badge clearly visible. She hadn't noticed me yet, too busy posing with underprivileged children for photo ops that would dominate her social media for weeks. Excuse me, are you with Seattle Metropolitan? I turned to find a young reporter from the local paper, notebook in hand. That's right, I said, slipping easily into my David Chen persona. Here to do a feature on rising social media influencers who are making a difference. Oh, you should definitely talk to Sarah Martinez then. She's the organizer. Really inspiring story about overcoming adversity and giving back. I'll be sure to get some quotes, I said, raising my camera. Mind if I start with some candid shots? For the next hour, I documented everything. Sarah's fake smiles with the children. Trevor lurking in the background, clearly uncomfortable around kids. Madison working her phone constantly, probably managing Sarah's social media in real time. But I was really waiting for the moment I knew was coming. At exactly 3 p.m., as Sarah took the stage to give her keynote speech about turning pain into purpose, I activated the small device I'd planted in the sound system earlier that morning. Sarah's voice filled the room. Thank you all for being here today to support these wonderful children who... Then the audio cut out, replaced by a different recording. Sarah's voice, but from a private conversation I'd captured through some very expensive surveillance equipment. God, these charity things are so boring, but the optics are amazing. Nothing says redeemed victim like helping poor kids, right? The room went dead silent. Sarah's face went white as she realized what was happening. The recording continued. Trevor thinks I'm being too obvious about the money grab, but honestly, trauma pays better than lifestyle content. I should send Danny a thank you card. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Parents started pulling their children closer. The news cameras kept rolling, but now they were capturing Sarah's horror instead of her triumph. I kept taking pictures, documenting every second of her public humiliation. Sarah frantically gestured to the sound technician, but the recording wasn't coming from his equipment. It was broadcasting from speakers I'd hidden throughout the venue, all controlled by an app on my phone. The best part is, everyone feels so sorry for me now. I've got book deals, speaking engagements, brand partnerships, all because people think I'm some kind of survivor. It's honestly genius. Madison was trying to push through the crowd toward the stage, probably to help Sarah, but she froze when the next part of the recording played. Madison's been so helpful with the whole thing. She even helped me doctor some of those screenshots I posted online. Made Danny look way worse than he actually was. Now Madison looked sick too, but I wasn't done. The final part of the recording was the piece de resistance. The funniest part? I'm probably going to dump Trevor soon anyway. He's hot, but he's broke and stupid. Plus, Madison's been throwing herself at him, and honestly, they deserve each other. Maybe I'll catch them together and play the victim again. Betrayed by my best friend and boyfriend? That's worth at least another 50,000 followers. The crowd erupted. People started booing. Several of the charity organizers stormed toward the stage. The news reporters were frantically taking notes. Sarah grabbed the microphone, trying to regain control. This is fake. This is my abusive ex-boyfriend trying to sabotage my charity work. But her voice was shaking, and everyone could see the guilt written across her face. I decided it was time to make my presence known. Actually, Sarah, I called out, removing my fake press badge and stepping forward. I prefer the term investigative journalist. Every head in the room turned toward me. Sarah's eyes went wide with recognition and terror. Danny, she whispered, then louder. Security! This man is dangerous. He's stalking me. But the security guards, who were volunteers from the community, just looked confused. And the real reporters were now focused on me, sensing a bigger story. Ms. Martinez called out the TV news reporter. Do you deny that this recording is authentic? Of course I deny it. He probably used AI or something to fake my voice. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Actually, I have the original video files, complete with timestamps and metadata. I'm happy to provide them to any legitimate news organization for verification. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. You see, I continued, addressing the crowd, I spent 8 months documenting the real Sarah Martinez, the woman who turned our relationship into content, who lied about me to build her brand, who's been scamming her followers and stealing from charity accounts. That's not true, Sarah screamed. Trevor's gambling debts say otherwise. So do Madison's financial records. Did you know they've been embezzling from your business accounts, Sarah? Of course you didn't. You were too busy counting your victim points to notice your best friend and boyfriend were robbing you blind. Trevor, who'd been trying to sneak toward the exit, froze. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The room was in complete chaos now. Parents were demanding answers about where their donations had really gone. The news crews were getting everything on camera. Sarah was having what looked like a complete breakdown on stage. I walked calmly toward the exit, but paused at the door. Oh, and Sarah? This is just the beginning. See you around. As I left the community center, I could hear her screaming my name behind me, but it was drowned out by the angry voices of the crowd and the shouted questions from reporters. Phase 1 was complete. Sarah's carefully constructed victim narrative was in ruins. Her relationship with Trevor was about to explode, and her friendship with Madison was over. But I was just getting warmed up. 2 weeks later, Sarah's world had completely collapsed. The charity scandal had made national news. Her book deal was canceled. Her sponsorships were dropped. Trevor had fled town after his gambling debts became public, but not before Madison had exposed their affair in a desperate attempt to save herself. But Sarah, true to form, was trying to spin even this into a comeback story. She'd posted a tearful video claiming she was the victim of an elaborate revenge plot by her psychotic ex-fiancé and was planning a truth-telling livestream for tonight. She'd rented the old Starlight Amphitheater on the outskirts of town, the same venue where we'd had our first date. She was calling it her Final stand for the truth. Perfect. I arrived early, dressed in black, carrying a duffel bag full of equipment I'd been preparing for weeks. The amphitheater was mostly empty. Sarah's follower count had plummeted, and ticket sales had been dismal. Maybe 50 people scattered across seats that could hold 500. Sarah was on stage, testing her microphone, still trying to look like the victim even as her empire crumbled around her. She was thinner than I remembered, her designer clothes hanging loose, her famous confidence replaced by desperate energy. She spotted me in the crowd, and her face went pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the microphone, her voice echoing across the empty seats, "before I begin tonight's presentation, I need to point out that my stalker is here. Danny Morrison, the man who has been terrorizing me for months." A few people turned to look at me. I waved cheerfully. "Danny, I have a restraining order," she called out. I pulled out a folded paper and held it up. "Actually, Sarah, that restraining order was dismissed yesterday when the judge saw evidence of your perjury. Turns out lying in legal documents is frowned upon." Her face crumpled. She hadn't known about the dismissal yet. "But don't let me interrupt," I continued, settling into my seat. "Please, tell everyone your version of the truth. I'm fascinated to hear it." Sarah tried to regain her composure, but I could see her hands shaking as she gripped the microphone. "Danny Morrison is a dangerous man," she began. "He's been stalking me, sabotaging my events, trying to destroy my life because I had the courage to leave him." "Actually," I interrupted, standing up, "you never left me. I left you, at the altar, covered in rotten fruit. It was quite memorable." A few people in the audience chuckled. Sarah's face flushed red. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about." "No, Sarah, I exposed you. There's a difference." I started walking down the aisle toward the stage, my footsteps echoing in the mostly empty amphitheater. "You want to talk about truth? Let's talk about truth." I reached into my duffel bag and pulled out a portable projector, setting it up on the stage while Sarah backed away from me. "Truth number one," I said, connecting my laptop. "You've been lying about me for over a year." The projector lit up, displaying screenshots of Sarah's private messages where she admitted to fabricating stories about my behavior, doctoring evidence, and coordinating with her friends to spread false information about me online. Truth number two, you've been stealing from your followers. New images appeared showing bank records, fake charity receipts, and evidence of Sarah pocketing donations meant for underprivileged children. Truth number three, your entire victim narrative was a calculated business strategy. More screenshots, these showing Sarah's conversations with her publicist about how to monetize trauma, how to maximize sympathy, how to turn personal drama into profit. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of rage and frustration that her manipulations weren't working anymore. "You're sick," she screamed. "This is harassment. This is abuse." "This is accountability," I said calmly. "Something you've never experienced in your privileged little life." I turned to address the small audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, you came here tonight expecting to hear Sarah Martinez tell you her truth. Well, here it is. She's a narcissistic sociopath who views other people as props in her personal drama. She turned our relationship into content, our breakup into profit, and your sympathy into cash." Sarah lunged at me, trying to grab the laptop, but I easily stepped aside. She stumbled and fell, her designer dress tearing on the rough stage floor. "And now," I said, pulling out my phone, "for the grand finale." I opened the livestream app and started broadcasting to every social media platform simultaneously. Within seconds, viewers started joining. Hundreds, then thousands. "Hi, everyone," I said to the camera. "Danny Morrison here. Some of you might know me as Sarah Martinez's abusive ex-fiancé. I thought it was time you met the real me." The viewer count was climbing rapidly. Sarah was trying to get to her feet, mascara streaming down her face. "For the past year, this woman has built a career on lying about me. She's taken your money, your sympathy, your trust, and she's used it all to fund her lifestyle, while actual victims of abuse have been ignored and underfunded." I turned the camera towards Sarah, who was now sobbing on the stage floor. Sarah Martinez is not a victim. She's a predator, and tonight, her hunting season ends. The comments were pouring in faster than I could read them, but I could see the general sentiment. People were angry, disgusted, calling for Sarah to be prosecuted. Sarah, I said, turning back to her, you wanted to control the narrative so badly. You wanted to be the victim, the survivor, the inspiration. Well, congratulations. You're finally going to be remembered for exactly what you are. She looked up at me with pure hatred in her eyes. I'll destroy you for this, she whispered. With what? Your canceled book deal? Your lost sponsorships? Your zero credibility? I laughed. Sarah, you already destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone got to watch. The live stream had reached 50,000 viewers. The comments were brutal, but fair. People sharing their own experiences with manipulators like Sarah, thanking me for exposing her, calling for investigations into her charity fraud. I looked around the empty amphitheater at the woman who'd once controlled my entire world, now broken and powerless on the stage, at the small crowd of people finally seeing her for what she really was. You know what the funny thing is, Sarah? You taught me everything I needed to know to destroy you. You showed me how to manipulate narratives, how to build audiences, how to turn personal drama into public spectacle. I just learned to do it better than you. I packed up my equipment while Sarah continued sobbing. The few people in the audience were filing out, many of them on their phones, probably sharing clips of what they'd just witnessed. As I reached the exit, I turned back one final time. Oh, and Sarah, thanks for the content. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving Sarah Martinez alone on the stage where our story had begun, finally facing the consequences of her actions. My phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, friend requests, interview offers, job opportunities from people who'd seen the live stream and wanted to work with someone who could orchestrate such a complete and devastating takedown. I drove home through the quiet streets, past the coffee shop where I'd once proposed to a woman I thought I loved, past the church where I'd planned to marry her, past all the places that had once held such painful memories. They didn't hurt anymore. They were just locations now, emptied of their power over me. Sarah Martinez had tried to turn me into a villain in her story. Instead, she'd created her own destroyer. And unlike her manufactured drama, this ending was real, final, and completely deserved. Completely